Shalom, this is Hakam. Y'all, ben-Emmett again with another exciting edition of the Torah Watchman show. Video series continues, topic of interest. What is the topic of interest for today's video? Here's the title I've chosen and God laid on my heart. Did the prophet Zechariah prophesy about October 7, 2023? Wow, that sounds like a very wild claim, right? You know how long ago Prophet Zechariah lived? You know, back in the time of tribal Israel. Well, first of all, let's get started with 2 Chronicles chapter 35, and we're going to talk about King Josiah. You may have not heard too much about him. Now, unfortunately, there were not a lot of righteous Judean kings. About half and half, were righteous or somewhat righteous, and the other just absolutely evil. Now, he lived between 630 and 609 before Common Era. So that gives you a time frame. Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, lived about 700 before Common Era. Now, to give you context, the prophet Jeremiah, he lived during the time of King Josiah. So, what happened? He was a young king, a very young king, and he was not like his evil father or his evil grandfather, Manasseh. And he did many wonderful things for Israel, for Judea. This is after northern Israel, the 9.5 tribes were carried off to Assyria. So all those left of Israel, as far as Jewish is concerned, was just Judea, the southern kingdom. But anyway, he cleaned up the temple, removed all his father's idols, Moloch and Baal worship and things like that, cleansed the temple, had a season of mourning, like sitting Shiva, for just saying we've sinned against God in heaven. Really pleased the Lord so much. But he had his own conflicts. He was young, maybe a little bit impetuous, like a lot of young kings would be. And he got into trouble because I think he allowed his ego get out of control. God warned him about Pharaoh Necho, and he's coming against Judea. Okay, he was crossing the river Euphrates. I'm not sure if the Pharaoh was really interested in Judea, but he was just conquering some of that land that used to belong to Assyria, and Assyria was transitioning quickly to Babylon. So this is between two major superpowers at that time. But anyway, he died. He was shot several times with an arrow. He was brought back to Jerusalem, where he died. In verse 25, if you look in 2 Chronicles chapter 35, there's a very nice verse here. And Jeremiah lamented Josiah, the weeping prophet, and all the male and female singers spoke of Josiah in their lamentations until this day. So there's a lot of eloquy, a lot of poems, a lot of odes and songs and things of this nature of him, because he meant so much to so many people, especially if he was a younger king, the younger generation of that time, Generation X or whatever. They identified with someone that was pretty much their age. And if you had a son that died in military service, you probably empathized with the sudden and tragic death of Josiah. So there was a lot of lamentation going on, literally. Sitting Shiva, they actually built a statue of a memorial for him. And there's a lot of things written in Jeremiah about this tragic loss of this righteous king who made a logistical error, and because he disobeyed God and he was outside the scope of God's ability to protect him. What Josiah actually did, he extended out the time frame from the judgments and curses of God that his grandfather Manasseh and Ammon brought was pretty much going to bring upon Judea. Now, Zechariah chapter 12. I don't have to remind anyone how horrific the massacres of the Jews on October 7th, 2023 was. It caught everyone off guard, even called the ISA, Benjamin Netanyahu, the IDF commanders, the chief of staff, all of them. Believe it or not, it caught them off guard. It was hours after the horrific attack began, like 6 o'clock in the morning, before the IDF even deployed forces. Before the IF, the Air Force there, would actually launch any counter strikes against Hamas. But the brutality of Hamas was so severe, it even rivaled the evil and butchery of Nazis, of Hitler. They did things that was rivaling even ISIS, you know? And I don't want to get into details of the horrific nature of that, but altogether it was about 1,300 people, both Jews and Gentiles, a lot of tourists, a lot of Americans and other people from Europe were murdered, just butchered where they were. Women and children indiscriminately in nursing homes, the elderly, the defenseless, babies, everything else, just beheading. Just horrific. So this is what was going on during that time. And Israel's still mourning for this. Every synagogue today in America that I've been to has in some place, they either have a yellow cross tie like against a tree. You saw a lot of this in 9/11 when so many people died. Well, Americans put a little memento, yellow cross tie or clip per se on a tree or something like this, or they wear it on their shirts. Some Jews were so taken back about a new Holocaust in their time when we say never again. They actually had that old Jewish star that Hitler made the Jews wear during the 1940s. So with this being said, well, nearly 900 soldiers have died so far. Hundreds of hostages were murdered before they could be released through a terrorist prisoner exchange. It impacted generations of Jews. Fathers and mothers did not come home to their children. There's probably close to 100 orphan children because of this horrific attack. Now I'm going to read to you the prophet Zechariah chapter 12. In verse 9, it says, "And it shall come to pass on that day, the end of days, that I and God, saying, I, God, will seek to destroy all the nations that come upon Jerusalem." If you remember a prophecy against Damascus, that Damascus will fall. Well, Damascus, Syria has fallen. Why? Because Syria and the Arab conflicts going back to 1948 and 1967, 1971, where Israel won that war decisively and seized the Golan Heights. Well, and all the payback against the evil President Assad in Syria, Damascus is a trash heap. It just is in ruins, much like Gaza right now. And look how the Palestinians have paid for supporting the Hamas terrorist organization. Most of their homes, hospitals, schools, mosques, place of business have been destroyed. The infrastructure completely destroyed. It's almost uninhabitable from what it was before October 7th, 2023. Look at Egypt. Look what Egypt has done in the past. Well, Egypt used to stretch its arm across So all of Saudi Arabia and much of the Levant. And now look at Egypt, what is left today. Look what's left of Germany, the Third Reich. It doesn't exist anymore. Mussolini in Italy, who was a rabid anti-Semite, who allied himself with Hitler and the Arabs and the Palestinians that hated the Jews and wanted them to burn. That's what the Grand Mufti said in Palestine per se, told Hitler, why don't you burn them? So all these nefarious adversarial nations that hate the Jewish people, they've all come to ruin. Look at Lebanon. Look at Hezbollah. Hezbollah essentially does not have a military capacity anymore. Hamas essentially does not have a military capacity anymore. And Iran, the great evil of Iran, Persia, their military capacity has been severely compromised. And everyone has been humbled because of this, okay? So in the future, there will be further payback, further judgments against all these Gentile nations that reared their ugly heads against Jerusalem. Siding with terrorists, the United Nations has sided with terrorists time and time again and refused to call out Hamas for their genocidal murders. So what they're saying, they're accusing the IDF for genocidal murders. Verse 10, it says, and I will pour out upon the house of David, and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem, a spirit of grace and supplications, and they shall look to me because of those who they have been thrust through, namely by swords. Again, this is a prophecy given to Zechariah. There were no tanks, there were no machine guns, there were no rocket launchers, there were no missiles in the time of Zechariah. So the best contextual vision that God could have given to Zechariah to show how people were killed in battle was being thrust through and killed by a sword. So the verb and the adjective, the adverb there being thrust through is actually an implication of swords. It does not say swords, but when you thrust through a human body, you're using a dagger or a stabbing weapon, not germane. And they shall mourn over it as one mourns over an only son, and shall be in bitterness, therefore, as one is embittered over a firstborn son. Now, notice the operative words here. The Gospel of John 10 says this is Jesus, pierced. No, it's not pierced. A thrust through is just thrust through with a sword. It's not talking about crucifixion. But anyway, it's very interesting here. It says, and they shall look to me because of those who have been thrust through. This is not one person. Now, these are people that were martyred. These are people that were heroes of the people, defenders of Israel. And of course, what we're talking about, Zechariah in verse 10, this is after Israel became a nation again, after the Jews returned to Israel in 1948 and founded their government. So we're living in those days right now. So this talking about a group of people, probably men and women, when it says they have plural pronouns, referring to a group of people that were killed or murdered, and then the rest of the people living, maybe relatives or friends of these people, there would be mourning, as you would mourn over your firstborn son. If you're a young married couple, you enjoy your baby son, and then he dies tragically of some strange illness or disease, you will be mourning, of course, at that. And literally, there were a lot of sons and daughters who died in IDF and IF and other, the Mossad and everything else, that died, and there are many fathers and grandfathers to those sons, and they're mourning them to this day. There's a lot of mothers mourning their sons and daughters today. A lot of grandmothers, bubbies, are mourning their relatives as well, and they're still mourning. It's created so much mourning that Jews throughout Europe left their comfortable zones of security in Europe and moved to Israel. American Jews, men, moved to Israel to fight with the IDF. People have forgotten all their disputes they had like judicial reform and like rabbinical disputes with women asserting their rights, their Torah rights to stand before the Western Wall and hold a Torah and pray, and same thing as men, except they were before they would separate them off, they would rip the Torahs out of the hand, but now they have rights to worship equally at the world's largest synagogue, which is the Western Wall, the Kotel. So all these political disputes have fallen on the wayside because of Am Yisrael, the need for us to unite as Jewish people, as great as it was when we founded the nation of Israel in 1948. Verse 11, on that day there shall be a great mourning in Jerusalem, like the mourning of Hadadrimmon in the Valley of Megiddon. Okay, this is Megiddo. Okay, this valley is the same valley that King Josiah lost his life, or he received lethal wounds through numerous arrows, driven through his body. Verse 12, and it says, and the land shall mourn. The land, Eretz Israel, shall mourn. And get this is the only place in the entire Bible, the Jewish Bible, that it says this. Every family apart. The family of the house of David apart, and their wives apart. The family of the house of Nathan apart, and their wives apart. Verse 13, it continues, the family of the house of the Levi apart, and their wives apart. The family of the Shimeites apart, and their wives apart. What Zechariah is saying, that individual families will be broken and splintered apart so much that say loved ones that were lost in two families, respectively, in the war, October 7th. They had their sons and daughters, the remaining people, maybe mothers, grandmothers. They went, and for the first time, they went to that family. They didn't even know, and they went there and mourned with them. And women mourned uniquely versus men, and men mourned differently from women. And you have groups of people that Zechariah said that women will mourn, men will mourn, individual families will mourn. Despite your social economic status, you will mourn. From the great to the smallest, you will mourn. And you will have teshuva in your heart, and you will bow, and you ask for forgiveness, because God is trying to give us a message, a calling card to say, wake up, Israel, unite, or these things will happen over and over again. All those things that we thought were so important, like judicial reform, pretty much the liberals in Tel Aviv, warring out in the streets and riots and destroying public property, and then essentially they wanted a coup over Benjamin Netanyahu's elected government. All of this going on, it was thousands and thousands of protesters in Tel Aviv, but now there are thousands and thousands of protesters for vindicating those people that lost their lives, that were murdered, vindicating the hostages that are still remaining in Israel, and the corpses and the bodies of our hostages are being hidden as ransom by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Finally, in verse 14, all the remaining families, every family apart, and their wives apart. Now, a lot of things divide up families, right? Politics, religion, and just arguments, Some people never talk to their father again when they get older. People don't forgive one another. So this kind of thing is much different than politics or religious or just getting into an argument with your brother, that kind of thing. What happened here divided up families in a way that's never divided them up before. Sure, and the Holocaust was a horrible division and breakout, destroyed generation of Jewish families. So did World War II, when 32 million Russians lost their lives, civilians and soldiers in a horrible war. I'm just saying, yes, but Israel is a very small country. You may not think 1,400 people is a lot of people, but proportionally, I heard someone say like 1,000 or 1,200 people died in 9/11. It's like if there were 30 something thousand people that died on 9/11 because of the proportion of population in Israel, the United States is much different. It did impact us. There's no Jew in the US that does not have a friend, a nephew, or cousin that was not killed in this horrific war. So what I'm saying is, I'm not going to set a time. I'm not going to set a date. That's not Jewish to do that, and it's wrong to do that. It does not bring glory to God to do that. What I'm saying is, what I just read you is exactly what happened in October 7th, 2023. Soldiers, civilians, men and women, and children were murdered, and they were driven through and killed. Think about beheading, driven through, that kind of thing. Stabbing, brutality that you cannot imagine, brutality on a corpse. That kind of evil thing has broken the hearts of every rabbi and every Jew on the planet, if you have a soul. We don't fight so much between our different denomination breakouts in Judaism anymore. I don't see the kind of adversarial relationship between rabbinists and Karaite Jews. I don't see that anymore. I don't see it. Now, sure, Democrat Jews that vote Democrat in the United States, they still have their own banter. They're radical left. They're like Karl Marx. They're like Lenin. They're like the communists, and they are just lost souls, as in my mind. But there are other Democrats and independents alike who have joined the more conservative right in the United States and saying enough is enough. I even heard some things from the Democratic senator, the minor majority leader in the Senate, said that anti-Semitism is at historic levels in America because of October 7th, and it's like the 1930s leading up to the Holocaust by Hitler. I hope this is meaningful to you. Some Christians say, when's the last days? When will Jesus return? You know, Jews are hoping that the Mashiach will reveal himself. The Prince of King David, we hope. Well, I said it. That writing is literally in Aramaic on my Tanai, my engagement license. It's hanging on my wall, my dining room. It's on my ketubah, my marriage license. That if the Mashiach tarries is coming, we're going to have a blissful wedding in the month of Tesserae. We always say this, but are we living in the last days? Are we living in the East days? The whole Middle East has had a complete realignment. We've had a complete realignment politically in the United States. So what is next? What is next? What I'm saying is, if you're mourning right now, if you're asking God to forgive you of your sin, if you're on your knees praying for others, true beneficial prayers when you cry, you have tears in your eyes for those people you never met. It breaks my heart when I think about a young mother and her two babies, a boy and a girl, red-haired, and all of Israel mourned for these people. They barely knew who they were. But the mother and the children, her children were strangled in front of the mother, and the mother was brutally murdered, without me getting into more details. What does it take to make a Jew have trembling knees and fear before God, to fall on our faces, to forget all the evil we have against our fellow Jewish brothers and sisters, to forget all the grudges and all this? This horrific Holocaust, October 7th, 2023. I think Zechariah hit the nail on the head. He prophesied a great prophecy in this time, in the time of Jeremiah, that is coming true in the day that we live in this generation. Exciting? Foreboding? I don't know. Anyway, ben-Emmett signing out. Take care. Shalom Aleichem. Until the next time. God bless you. If you've enjoyed this program, please click like and subscribe.